My name is Victoria Sinclair. I am 25 years old, and I learned the hard way that in some families, love is allocated like a trophy, given only to the children who look impressive on paper. They called me the practical one but excluded me from the family chat. Before I show you how I made them regret every insult, hit subscribe if you believe respect is more important than a job title. Represent your country in the comments and drop your current time. I was not born into poverty, at least not the kind people romanticize. We had a modest house with beige carpet and a porch light that flickered when the wind came in from the highway. My father kept the mortgage paid with the stubborn pride of a man who believed stability was a sacred duty. My mother kept the kitchen spotless, as if cleanliness could substitute for tenderness. My siblings, Mark and Emma, were the family's polished investment. Their lives were displayed like framed diplomas on a wall. And then there was me. The youngest. The one who did not sparkle. The one who learned early that you could be essential and still be invisible. After Dad died, the air inside our house changed. It became thinner, sharper. As if grief had stripped away the soft parts and left only structure and survival. People assume death makes families closer. Sometimes it does. Other times, it simply exposes what was always there, waiting behind polite manners. My mother did not collapse in the dramatic way people expect. She did not wail. She did not fall apart publicly. She became even more composed, almost ceremonial in her sorrow. She kept her back straight at the funeral, thanked everyone for coming, accepted casseroles like offerings, and spoke about my father with the careful tone of someone protecting a public image. But in private, she began reorganizing us. Not as her children. As categories. Mark became the future. He was in college then, studying business, speaking in confident sentences about internships and networking. When he called home, my mother's voice softened into a warmth I rarely heard. "That's my boy," she would say. "You're going to do great things." Emma became the pride. She was older, engaged, working in an office with glass walls and a company laptop she carried like an accessory. She had a respectable social circle and the kind of smile that made people assume she was always fine. And I became the practical one. The utility. The silent supplement. At first, it happened in small requests. "Victoria," my mother would say, looking up from the bills spread across the dining table, "can you pick up an extra shift this week?" I did. "Victoria," she'd say later, "can you cover the electric? Mark's tuition payment is due." I did. The requests never sounded like demands. They were phrased like inevitabilities. Like gravity. And because I was grieving too, because I was young and afraid of losing the only home I had ever known, I obeyed. I took a job at a factory on the edge of town. Night shift. The work was loud, repetitive, and brutally honest. Metal moved through machines like something alive. Conveyor belts rattled. Fluorescent lights washed everyone's skin into the same pale tone, as if the building refused to acknowledge individuality. My job wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with a title that looked good in conversation. But it paid steadily, and steady pay is what keeps roofs overhead and heat in the vents. Most nights, I stood for 10 hours. My hands became rough. My shoulders developed a constant ache that settled in like a permanent tenant. The smell of oil clung to my clothes no matter how much detergent I used. And still, every time I sent money home, my mother responded as if I had done nothing extraordinary. A simple, "thanks," at best. Often, not even that. My siblings never asked where the money came from. They never asked what it cost me. They accepted the stability it provided like a natural resource, like rainwater collecting in a barrel. Then, over time, something more insidious developed. Shame. My mother began speaking about my job the way people speak about an unfortunate habit. "She's working nights right now," she would say to guests, with a smile that carried a faint apology. "Just until she figures something else out." Figures something else out. As if my work was not real work. As if I wasn't holding our home together with blistered hands and sleep deprivation. Mark once made a joke at dinner, one of those jokes that sounds harmless until you realize it's a small knife. "So, Vic," he said, grinning, When are you going to stop doing the whole industrial thing? Emma laughed softly, her nails clicking against her wineglass. It's not a forever career, right? I remember staring at my plate, watching the steam rise from the food, and feeling something melancholic move through me, an awareness that no matter how much I did, I would always be seen as temporary. Not because my job was temporary, because my value was. And the thing is, I didn't resent Mark or Emma for having better opportunities. I wasn't jealous of their polished lives. I wanted them to succeed. I wanted our family to recover from Dad's death in whatever way we could. But what I couldn't stomach, even then, was the way their success became a standard used to diminish me. My mother's logic was simple, though she never stated it directly. Achievements deserve celebration. And factory work was embarrassing. That was the foundation of everything. When Mark got a promotion, my mother arranged a dinner at an expensive restaurant, even though she claimed we were tight on money. She wore pearl earrings. She invited relatives. She posted pictures online with captions like "proud of my son," as if pride was a currency she could spend publicly. When Emma bought a new car, my mother called it inspiring. She spoke of her as if she had conquered the world with sheer grace. And when I paid the mortgage, my mother called it helpful. Helpful. Like a spare hand. Like a background utility. Not heroic. Not impressive. Not worth mentioning. Still, I worked. I kept my head down. Because grief had taught me that survival sometimes requires swallowing indignity. And then Mother's Day came. Mother's Day had always been complicated in our family. It was less about gratitude and more about performance. The children who looked good were expected to show up and smile. The gifts were expected to be photogenic. The sentiment was required, but only in the right tone, never too raw, never too honest. That year, Mother's Day fell on a Sunday, and I was scheduled for a long Saturday night shift that would bleed into early morning. I hadn't complained. I hadn't asked for time off. I assumed we would do something small, maybe dinner later, maybe flowers delivered. I assumed I would be included. I was wrong. It happened during a break. The factory break area was not a gentle place. It wasn't designed for comfort, only for temporary relief. Plastic chairs, scratch tables, the constant hum of vending machines. The smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air like fatigue. I sat near the back, resting my elbows on my knees, staring at my phone as if it could offer a different life. My coworker and best friend, Mia Brooks, was sitting across from me. Mia had the kind of face that always looked like she had survived something and learned from it. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun. Her hands were stained faintly from work. She was chewing a granola bar with the seriousness of someone who understood that food, at 2 a.m., was a form of mercy. "You look haunted," Mia said, swallowing. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I replied automatically. Mia snorted. "That's never true when you say it like that." I gave her a faint smile, but my eyes stayed on my phone. That was when the notification appeared. A group chat. The name at the top was cheerful, almost overly sweet. Mother's Day brunch plan, bouquet emoji. My chest warmed slightly with relief. There it is, I thought. The plan. The inclusion. I clicked. The first message was from Emma. "Okay, I booked the table for 11:30. Then Mark responded. "Perfect. Lily's bringing flowers. I'll cover the gift card." Lily was Mark's girlfriend. She wasn't even family. Yet her name was there, placed into the narrative smoothly, like she belonged. Then my mother sent a message that made my breath slow. "Can't wait to celebrate with my successful kids," yellow heart emoji. Successful kids. I stared at the screen. It felt like the room's fluorescent lights grew harsher. My eyes moved up, reading the participant list. Mark, Emma, Lily. My mother. Aunt Julie. A cousin I barely spoke to. And then the empty space where my name should have been. I blinked once. Then twice. I thought perhaps I had clicked the wrong chat. Perhaps there was another one. Perhaps my phone had failed to load the full participant list. I refreshed. I checked again. No. I was not there. It was the kind of exclusion that didn't even bother to hide itself. Not a forgotten invitation buried in confusion. Not a quiet oversight. A clean erasure. My throat tightened. I scrolled further. Mark wrote, "Let's make this special for Mom. She deserves it." Emma replied, "Yes. And let's keep it classy this year." Then my mother again. "Just the successful kids, okay? I want this to be nice." I felt the words settle into my body like cold water. It wasn't simply that I wasn't invited. It was that my absence was part of the plan. Classy, nice, successful. And by implication, not me. My fingers began to tremble slightly. Not visibly to anyone else, but enough that I noticed. Enough that my phone felt heavier in my hands. Mia watched me carefully. "What?" she asked, her voice low. "What happened?" I didn't answer immediately. I stared at the messages again, forcing myself to absorb the reality. Forcing myself not to invent excuses for them. Because I had done that my whole life, manufactured explanations to protect them from the consequences of their choices. Maybe Mom didn't mean it. Maybe Emma didn't notice. Maybe Mark. No. They noticed. They designed it. My chest began to ache in a way that wasn't physical, yet felt like pressure pressing inward. I whispered, barely audible. "They made a Mother's Day group chat." Mia's brows knitted. "Okay?" I swallowed. "And they didn't put me in it." Mia's eyes sharpened instantly. "What do you mean they didn't put you in it?" I turned my phone toward her without speaking. She read silently, her jaw tightening with each line. When she reached the message, "Successful kids," her mouth parted slightly in disbelief. "Oh," she said, voice flat. "Oh, Victoria." I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared at the table, at the cheap plastic surface scratched by 1,000 exhausted hands. Because the realization wasn't loud. It was surgical. All the years of being useful. All the overtime. All the checks I wrote to keep the mortgage alive. And they still saw me as a stain to be hidden from their celebration. Something in me sank. Then, slowly, something else rose. Not anger. Not hysteria. Clarity. My thumb hovered over the screen. And in that moment, I did something I hadn't done before. I took a screenshot. One clean image. Proof. Not because I wanted to start a fight, but because I was done pretending I imagined the cruelty. I saved it to a folder. Labeled it with the date and time. Mother's Day, 2:14 a.m. Mia leaned forward, voice quiet but firm. "That wasn't an accident," she said. I looked at her. "I know," I replied. Mia's expression softened, and she reached across the table, placing her hand on mine for a brief second, just enough contact to remind me I wasn't alone in that fluorescent, exhausting world. "You don't have to keep doing this," she murmured. I stared at my phone, still open to the group chat I was not included in. The messages continued to roll in. "Emma, should we do photos after?" Mark, "Definitely. Lily can take them." My mother, "Yes. I want a picture with my successful kids." Successful kids. I closed my eyes for a moment. The factory noise seemed distant. The hum of machines, the clank of metal, none of it mattered as much as the quiet betrayal in my hand. I opened my eyes again, and my voice was calm when I spoke. "They've been celebrating without me for years," I said. "This is just the first time I saw the invitation." Mia nodded slowly. "What are you going to do?" she asked. That was the question. What do you do when you finally see your place in someone else's story? Do you beg them to rewrite it? Or do you leave the book entirely? I looked at the screenshot again. And I made my decision, right there behind the loading dock, with fluorescent lights overhead and oil in the air. Not dramatic. Not loud. Quietly. Completely. I turned off notifications for my family chat. Then I muted my mother's number. Then I blocked Mark, Emma. One by one, I erased them from my daily access the same way they erased me from their celebration. Mia watched, eyes wide. "You're really doing it," she whispered. I exhaled slowly. "Yes," I said. My hands didn't shake anymore. "They made me disappear," I continued, voice even. "So I'm going to disappear properly." I stood up as the brake bell sounded. The factory swallowed me back into noise and labor, but I felt something strange settle into my chest. A stillness. A calm that didn't come from denial. It came from resolve. Because when people make it clear you are not welcome in their love, you stop knocking. And when my mother sat at brunch later that week, smiling beside her successful kids, she had no idea the most useful one had already left the building. The first thing I noticed after I muted them was how quiet my life became. Not lonely, quiet. There is a difference. Loneliness feels like being abandoned in a room with the lights off. Quiet feels like stepping outside after a fire alarm has been screaming for years and realizing the world still has birds in it. Still has air. Still has space to think. I worked the rest of my shift that night with a peculiar sense of separation, as if my body was present at the factory but my mind had already moved forward. The machines kept their relentless rhythm. The conveyor belts kept swallowing raw material and spitting out finished product. The supervisors kept walking past with clipboards and tired expressions. And yet, something had changed inside me. I was no longer performing loyalty for people who had quietly disowned me. At 6:12 a.m., when I clocked out and stepped into the pale morning light, the sky was still heavy with clouds. The air smelled like damp pavement and motor oil. My bones ached in the familiar places, but my chest felt strangely light. Mia walked beside me toward the parking lot, hands tucked into her jacket. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm thinking," I replied. Mia nodded once, as if she understood the depth of that simple statement. "Thinking can be dangerous," she said. "It's how people start changing their lives." I looked at her and almost smiled. "Good," I said. "I'm ready for something dangerous." Mia's gaze flickered over my face, and her tone softened. "You're not doing this to punish them, are you?" she asked. I unlocked my car and sat inside before answering. The heat sputtered on, weak at first. "No," I said calmly. "I'm doing this to stop bleeding." Mia leaned on the open door frame, considering me. "They're going to come looking," she warned. "I know. And they'll try to make you feel guilty." "I know." Mia exhaled, a short breath that carried years of lived understanding. "Then promise me one thing," she said. "What?" "Don't explain yourself 100 different ways to people who already decided you don't matter," she said. Her words struck something deep in me, something tender, something protective. "I won't," I said. Mia straightened. "Good," she replied. "Because if you try, they'll keep moving the target. And you'll keep chasing it until you collapse." I watched her walk toward her own car, and for a moment I stood still, feeling the weight of her honesty. Then I drove home. Except, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place I'd been paying for. I didn't storm into the house and announce my departure. I didn't slam doors. I didn't throw accusations like stones. People like my mother thrive on visible drama. It gives them a shape they can hold up to others. "See? She's unstable. See? She's ungrateful. See? She's emotional." I refused to give her that. Instead, I moved like someone preparing a clean exit from an unsafe building. I went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the pale wall. The house was silent except for the refrigerator humming in the kitchen and the distant sound of my mother moving around upstairs. She hadn't called me yet. She didn't know. Or perhaps she had noticed my silence and assumed it was temporary, the way my feelings had always been temporary to her. I opened my banking app. The mortgage payment was scheduled for that week, an auto-pay I'd set up after my father died, because my mother had cried at the dining room table one night and said she didn't know how she would manage alone. I had believed her then. Now I understood the truth. She wasn't alone. She had simply been comfortable having me carry what she didn't want to carry. My finger hovered over the payment. Then I canceled it. One tap. No fanfare. No revenge monologue. Just the quiet removal of a support beam. I paused afterward, waiting for my body to panic. Waiting for guilt to flood in. Waiting for the old reflex, the one that made me rush to fix things before anyone even asked. But nothing happened. No collapse. No thunder. Only a calm clarity settling deeper into my bones. I didn't stop there. I opened the list of monthly expenses I had been covering without question: utilities, partial groceries, my mother's car insurance, just this once that somehow became permanent. I canceled what wasn't mine. I removed myself as the family's silent infrastructure. Then, slowly, I began packing. Not everything. Just what mattered. My documents, my clothes, a few books I'd bought with my own money, and the small photo of my father that sat on my dresser, a picture of him standing in our yard with a proud, tired smile, holding a coffee cup like it was a trophy. I stared at that photo longer than I expected. Dad had believed in duty. But I didn't think he would have wanted his youngest daughter reduced to a tool. I slipped the photo into my bag. Then I left the room. My mother was in the kitchen, pouring herself coffee. Her hair was neatly pinned. She wore a robe that looked expensive, the kind she wouldn't have bought if she didn't think she deserved softness. She glanced at me briefly. "Long night?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She nodded as if that explained everything. Then she went back to stirring sugar into her cup. I looked at her face, at her calmness, her practiced neutrality, and something melancholic moved through me again. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask if I was okay. Because my well-being was not part of her emotional inventory. So I did not tell her what I had done. Not yet. I carried my bag to the front door, slipped on my shoes, and walked outside into the soft, gray morning. No one stopped me. No one even noticed. Mia let me stay with her for a few nights without asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. She didn't hover. She didn't pity me. She simply offered me space. Her apartment was small, but it felt honest, like everything inside it belonged to her because she chose it, not because she was trapped by obligation. The couch smelled like laundry detergent and the faint sweetness of the candles she burned after shifts. On the second night, while I sat at her tiny kitchen table eating reheated pasta, Mia leaned on the counter and watched me. "You're waiting for the fallout," she said. "Yes," I admitted. Mia nodded. "They're going to notice when something stops working," she said. "People like your mother don't notice love. They notice inconvenience." I looked down at my fork. "I don't want to fight," I said quietly. "You won't have to," Mia replied. "You'll just have to stand still while they panic." That was when I understood what Mia truly was to me, not just a friend, not just a coworker. She was a witness. The kind of witness that turns private pain into something real. In families like mine, the cruelest part isn't the cruelty itself. It's the way they convince you it isn't happening. Mia's presence made it undeniable. It took 2 days. 2 days before my phone lit up with my mother's name. I stared at the screen for a moment, feeling my pulse slow rather than spike. I wasn't afraid of her voice anymore. I had already stepped outside her control. I answered calmly. "Yes?" I said. My mother didn't start with hello. Her voice arrived sharp and clipped, as if she had been rehearsing anger. "Victoria," she said, "why didn't the mortgage payment go through?" There it was. Not "where are you?" Not "are you all right?" Not "why didn't you come home?" Only the machinery of her life malfunctioning. I kept my voice even. "I canceled it," I said. Silence. Then, a strained breath. "What do you mean you canceled it?" she demanded. I replied softly, "I am no longer paying it." Her voice rose immediately. "You can't just decide that." I almost smiled, not out of amusement, but out of recognition. "Apparently I can," I said. My mother's tone shifted into something more controlled, dangerously controlled. Victoria, she said, slower now, this is your home too. It was a fascinating statement. She said it like home was something I had received for free. This house is the home you've been living in because I kept it alive, I replied. Her breath caught. You're being dramatic, she snapped. There it was again. The familiar dismissal. Not an argument. Not a conversation. A label designed to shrink me. I leaned back against Mia's couch, staring at the wall. I'm being practical, I said calmly. It's what you raised me to be. Where are you? She demanded. I paused. I'm safe, I said. That's all you need to know. My mother's voice hardened. You're doing this because of some silly misunderstanding, aren't you? I said nothing. She continued, sharpened by irritation. This is Mother's Day week. Don't you dare start causing problems. Problems. As if I had created the exclusion. As if I had invented the group chat. I exhaled slowly. Mom, I said, I saw the invitation. Silence again, thicker this time. What invitation? She asked, though her voice had already shifted. Not confused. Not surprised. Wary. I let the pause stretch just long enough to make the truth uncomfortable. The Mother's Day group chat, I said. The one with your successful kids. Her tone became dismissive, almost bored. Oh, that, she said. Victoria, that wasn't meant to hurt you. You're overreacting. I felt something quiet settle in my chest, the final confirmation I needed. She wasn't sorry. She was irritated that I had noticed. I'm not overreacting, I replied. I'm responding accurately. Listen, my mother said, voice turning syrupy, we just wanted something nice, okay? It's not personal. Not personal. Being erased by your own mother, while your siblings are named like honored guests, was apparently not personal. I turned my phone slightly and looked at my screenshot folder. The proof sat there, silent and patient. I'm going to tell you something, I said calmly. And I want you to listen. My mother scoffed lightly. Oh, here we go. I am no longer available to be used, I said. That includes money. That includes labor. That includes emotional obedience. My mother's patience snapped. Used? She repeated, incredulous. You think you're used? After everything I've done for you? I could picture her face, eyes narrowed, mouth tight, offended by the idea that she owed me anything. I kept my voice steady. You didn't even notice I was gone until the mortgage didn't go through, I said. My mother went silent again. Then she said something that revealed everything. Well, yes, she said sharply. Because that's urgent. There it was. The confession without realizing it was a confession. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see it. I understand, I said. You should call Mark. My mother's voice rose. Mark has responsibilities. Emma has responsibilities. They can't just cover everything because you're having a tantrum. A tantrum. I let the word pass through me like wind. I'm not having a tantrum, I said. I'm stepping away. You're selfish, she spat. I didn't flinch. I used to think so, I replied. Every time I chose myself for even a second, you called it selfish. It trained me to believe my needs were a character flaw. My mother inhaled sharply. Victoria. But I continued calmly, because I wasn't speaking to convince her anymore. I was speaking to conclude. I've already saved the screenshot, I said quietly. So please don't insult my intelligence by pretending I imagined it. Her voice turned cold. Are you threatening me? She asked. No, I replied. I'm reminding you that truth exists, whether or not you enjoy it. Then I ended the call. Not with a slam. With a click. The next afternoon, I returned to the factory for another shift. I told myself to focus on work. To keep my life simple. To let the consequences unfold without my interference. But my family was not accustomed to consequences. They were accustomed to control. At 11:40 p.m., during my break, I stepped outside behind the loading dock, where the air was colder and the noise from inside became a muted roar. Trucks sat parked like sleeping beasts. The smell of diesel clung to everything. I was halfway through sipping vending machine coffee when I heard my name. Victoria. My body didn't jolt in fear. It simply went still. I turned. My mother stood near the edge of the lot, a dark coat wrapped around her. Mark was beside her, looking irritated as if he had been dragged out of a superior life into an inconvenient one. Emma stood slightly behind them, arms crossed, face composed in the way women learn to be composed when they believe they are correct. They looked completely out of place under the harsh industrial lighting, three polished people in a world built for labor. For a moment, I simply watched them approach. They had come to retrieve me like property. Not because they missed me. Because my absence had become expensive. My mother's voice was tight. "We need to talk," she said. I didn't move. "We are talking," I replied. Mark scoffed, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Can you not do this here?" he asked. "This is ridiculous." Emma's eyes swept over the loading dock, overtly disapproving. "It smells like metal," she said faintly, as if that alone explained why my life was inferior. I looked at all of them, then took another sip of my coffee. "This is where I work," I said calmly. "It's honest." My mother stepped closer. "Victoria, you're humiliating us," she hissed. The statement almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. "You humiliated me first," I replied softly. "I'm simply no longer hiding it." Emma's voice turned patronizing, smooth like polished glass. "You're taking this too far," she said. "Mom didn't mean anything by it. We just wanted Mother's Day to feel elevated. As if my existence lowered the atmosphere. Mark nodded, irritated. "Yeah," he said. "You're making this into some big tragedy." I studied my brother's face, the confident expression of a man who had never been forced to survive without help. "Mark," I said gently, "you didn't even notice I was paying the mortgage. That's how comfortable you were." His eyes narrowed. "I'm not the one who asked you to do that," he snapped. I tilted my head slightly. "No," I said. "You're the one who benefited from it." My mother's voice sharpened. "We are not here to argue about history," she said. "We are here to fix this." Fix this. Meaning, restore the previous arrangement where I carried the weight and they carried the pride. I kept my posture relaxed. "There is nothing to fix," I said. "There is only an adjustment." Emma sighed, as if I were a difficult employee. "Victoria, be reasonable," she said. "You can't just abandon the family. Mom needs help." I looked at my mother. My mother stared back, eyes flashing. "Say it," I said quietly. "What?" my mother demanded. "Say you need me," I replied. "Not my money. Not my labor, me." My mother's mouth opened, then closed again. For a brief moment, she looked genuinely uncertain, as if she'd never been asked that question in her life. Then her expression hardened. "This is not about feelings," she snapped. "This is about responsibility." There it was. The patriarchal logic of duty without tenderness. I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I said. "That answers it." Mark stepped forward, voice irritated. "Okay, enough," he said. "Just come home. We'll add you to the chat." Mom didn't think. I raised a hand slightly. "Stop," I said calmly. Mark blinked, surprised by the authority in my tone. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened the screenshot. Then I held it up. Not aggressively. Not theatrically, just openly. Emma's eyes widened the moment she saw the words. My mother's face went pale. Mark frowned, leaning closer. "What is that?" he demanded. I spoke softly, clearly. "The invitation," I said. "The one where I didn't exist." My mother's voice turned defensive instantly. "That doesn't prove anything," she snapped. "It was just a chat." I scrolled slightly. "And this," I said, still calm, "is where you wrote successful kids only." Emma's mouth tightened. Mark's expression shifted, confusion turning into discomfort. Mom, Mark said slowly, why would you say that? My mother looked at him as if betrayed. Because I was trying to make it special, she snapped. I'm allowed to want something nice. Emma's voice went quiet. So you excluded Victoria, she said, not quite accusing, not quite admitting. My mother's eyes flashed. She's being dramatic, she snapped again. She always does this. I looked at my mother's face and realized something with startling clarity. She had been calling me dramatic for so long that she had forgotten what I looked like when I was simply honest. I took a breath. I didn't come here to argue, I said. I came here to end this arrangement. Mark's voice rose. Arrangement? He repeated. Yes, I replied. The arrangement where I pay and you shine. Emma scoffed faintly. You're exaggerating. But I didn't let her finish. I have already canceled my payments, I said quietly. You will have to cover the mortgage yourselves. My mother's eyes widened. You can't do that, she whispered, fear finally cracking through her composure. I watched her face carefully. The fear wasn't about losing me. It was about losing control. I already did, I said. Then I looked at Mark and Emma. You're the successful kids, I said, voice smooth. This should be easy for you. Mark's face flushed. That's not fair. I tilted my head again. It's accurate, I said. My mother took a step forward, her voice trembling now. Victoria, she pleaded, and the words sounded strange coming from her mouth, like she had never practiced saying my name with sincerity. Please. We can't lose the house. I stared at her. You never worried about losing me, I replied softly. Only the house. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Stop being cruel, she whispered. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't change my tone. I am not being cruel, I said. I am being precise. Then I did the most important thing of all. I ended the conversation. Not with another argument. With a boundary. I looked at them one last time, my mother, trembling. Mark, frustrated. Emma, stunned. I hope you enjoy Mother's Day, I said quietly. With your successful kids. Then I turned my phone over in my hand and blocked my mother's number, Mark, Emma. One by one. Right there under the loading dock lights. Their faces changed as they realized what was happening. Victoria, wait. Emma called, her composure cracking. Mark stepped forward. You can't just. But it was already done. My mother made a small, broken sound, half gasp, half sob. You're really leaving, she whispered. I turned back for one final glance, my voice calm as winter air. I left the moment you erased me, I said. Tonight, I'm just making it official. And then I walked back inside. The factory doors swallowed me into noise and motion again, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. Because I had finally understood something. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes, silence is the conclusion of a long negotiation you never agreed to. When I walked back through the factory doors, the noise hit me like a familiar tide, metal, motion, repetition. It was not a beautiful world, but it was honest. It didn't pretend to love you while quietly deleting your name. It didn't smile in photographs and then erase you from the guest list. It paid you for what you gave it. No more, no less. For the rest of that shift, I worked the way I always had, steady hands, quiet focus, but something inside me had changed permanently. I wasn't numb. I wasn't hardened. I was simply no longer porous. Their voices could not seep into me the way they used to. At 5:58 a.m., I clocked out. At 6 a.m., I stepped into the morning air. The sky had cleared overnight. The clouds were gone, replaced by a thin, pale sunlight that made everything look sharper. The parking lot was empty now. My mother's car was gone. Mark and Emma were gone. But the space they left behind felt different than it would have before. It felt like closure. Mia was waiting near her car, arms folded against the chill. She didn't ask what happened. She just looked at me and said, "You did it." I nodded once. Mia exhaled like she'd been holding her breath on my behalf. "How do you feel?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. My old instinct would have been to say I felt guilty, or sad, or conflicted. But those feelings belonged to the version of me that still believed kindness was a currency that could purchase belonging. I said slowly, like I stopped donating blood to people who called it generosity. Mia's eyes softened. That's a clean way to say it, she murmured. And it's true. I got into my car and drove back to her apartment, the sunlight warming the steering wheel beneath my hands. The city looked ordinary, people heading to work, coffee shops opening, traffic forming slowly. And yet, I felt as if I was moving through the world for the first time without a leash around my throat. For 3 days, my phone stayed silent. Not because they suddenly respected boundaries. Because they were recalculating. People like my mother do not react immediately when they lose something. They first search for the easiest replacement. They call the golden children. They attempt to transfer the burden as if it's an item on a checklist. I knew exactly how the conversation would have gone. Mark, irritated, saying he didn't have the cash flow. Emma, offended, saying she had responsibilities. My mother, insisting it was temporary, the way every long-term sacrifice had always been temporary until it became my permanent assignment. Then, when they realized there was no replacement, the panic began. It came in the form of voicemails from unknown numbers, because blocking someone only works until they borrow a phone. The first voicemail was my mother's voice, strained and too sweet. "Victoria, sweetheart. It's me. Please call me back. We need to talk. This is becoming serious." The second voicemail was sharper. "Victoria, this is ridiculous. You've made your point. Now stop." The third voicemail was not my mother at all. It was Emma. Her voice was controlled, but the effort was visible in every syllable. "Victoria, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is affecting all of us. Mom is stressed. You need to stop acting like a martyr." A martyr. It was almost impressive how quickly they tried to transform my boundary into a personality flaw. Then Mark. His voicemail sounded like he was speaking through clenched teeth. "Victoria, call me back. We have bills due. Mom's freaking out. Just handle it, okay? Handle it." My family's favorite verb for my existence. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because I wasn't trying to teach them a lesson. I wasn't trying to make them understand. Understanding requires humility. And my family had never been fluent in that language. They didn't need to understand me. They needed to adjust to my absence. That was the consequence. And consequences don't require conversation. Mother's Day came like it always does, wrapped in flowers, pastel commercials, and the expectation of performance. That morning, I woke up in Mia's guest room to the soft smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Sunlight spilled across the floor in a thin golden stripe, making the space look gentler than it should have. Mia knocked lightly on the door. "I made eggs," she said. "And I'm not letting you pretend you don't deserve breakfast." I smiled faintly and got up. We ate quietly at her small table, the morning calm and private. No forced phone calls. No staged affection. No obligation disguised as love. Mia watched me carefully. "You okay today?" she asked. I took a sip of coffee and nodded. "I'm relieved," I admitted. Mia's brow lifted. "That's allowed," she said firmly. "Relief doesn't mean you don't love your mother. It means you stop loving her at the cost of yourself." Her words settled in my chest with the soft weight of truth. A few hours later, Mia left for an errand. I stayed behind, folding laundry, listening to the quiet hum of her apartment. That's when my phone buzzed. A notification from social media. I didn't even need to open it to know what it would be. But I did anyway. There they were. My mother, smiling too wide. Mark beside her, dressed in an expensive shirt, holding a gift bag like a prop. Emma on the other side, polished, perfect, leaning in like she belonged in the center of the photo. My mother's caption read, "Celebrating with my successful kids. So blessed." Successful kids. Again. As if the word itself was a shield against shame. I stared at the photo for a long moment. Not because I missed them. Because I noticed what they hadn't intended for anyone to notice. My mother's eyes looked tired. Mark's smile didn't reach his face. Emma's posture was stiff, like someone trying to remain composed under pressure. They looked like a family holding a frame together with brittle fingers. The photo was a performance. But now, there was strain in it. Because the foundation was missing. I was the foundation they never thanked. And I was gone. The next week, the calls grew more frantic. My mother tried every method she could think of. First, kindness. Then guilt. Then anger. Then urgency. Finally, she tried what she always tried when she couldn't control me emotionally. She tried to control me socially. She sent a message to Maya's phone. Mia showed it to me without comment, her mouth pressed into a line. It was from my mother. Tell Victoria to stop embarrassing us. People are asking questions. I read it twice. Embarrassing us. Not hurting her. Not abandoning the family. Not breaking trust. Embarrassing them. That was the true injury. Their reputations. Their carefully curated illusion. I handed the phone back to Mia. Mia's eyes were cold. She doesn't miss you, she said quietly. She misses the convenience. I nodded. I know. 2 days later, I got a message from my aunt, my mother's sister, the one who only called when she wanted information. It was a single line. Your mom says you're going through something. Call her. Going through something. As if boundaries were a temporary illness. I did not reply. Because my silence wasn't confusion. It was decision. Then came the final attempt. A letter. Not a text. Not a voicemail. A physical envelope mailed to Mia's apartment, addressed in my mother's handwriting. Mia held it like it was contaminated. Do you want to open it? She asked. I stared at it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened. But another part, the part that had been trained for years to anticipate her narrative, wanted to know what she would say when she had time to craft it. I opened it. The paper was thick. The handwriting was neat. My mother's tone was almost poetic. Victoria. I don't know what has gotten into you, but this isn't you. Family is all we have. Your father would be disappointed. We need you. Come home. I read it once. Then again. And I realized something that made my stomach go still. She didn't apologize. Not once. She didn't say, I hurt you. She didn't say, I excluded you. She didn't say, I see you. She simply demanded my return, draped in sentiment and my father's memory like a borrowed coat. And that was when I understood. My mother wasn't reaching for me. She was reaching for the role I played. The role of provider. The role of silent stabilizer. The role that allowed her to shine beside her successful kids while I held the house up from the shadows. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the envelope. Then I threw it away. Not with rage. With clarity. It's unsettling, the way life grows when you stop shrinking yourself for others. Within weeks, I found a small studio apartment not far from the factory, nothing luxurious, but clean, safe, and mine. The walls were blank and quiet. The kitchen was tiny. The windows faced a parking lot instead of a garden. But it was mine. No one could erase me from it. No one could use it as leverage. The first night I slept there, I lay on my mattress with a thin blanket, listening to the silence. It felt enormous. Like I'd been living in a crowded room for years, and suddenly I had an entire field to myself. I expected grief to hit me. Instead, I felt something steadier. Relief. And beneath the relief, something more powerful. Self-respect. I set up automatic savings, money that would go toward my future instead of my family's comfort. I bought a small plant for the windowsill and watered it like an apology I finally owed myself. I started taking small classes at the community college on my days off, logistics, management, anything that could build a path out of the factory if I ever wanted it. Not because factory work was shameful, but because options are freedom. One evening, after a late shift, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook open, my hair still damp from a shower, and I wrote something I hadn't written before. I am not embarrassing. I am not temporary. I am not a footnote. The words looked simple, but they felt revolutionary. About 2 months after I left, I received a text from an unknown number. I already knew who it was. It was my mother. The message was short, stripped of performance, because panic had finally replaced pride. Victoria. The bank sent a warning. We might lose the house. I stared at the screen. And for a moment, I felt that old reflex rise in me, the trained impulse to rescue them. To fix. To handle. To make sure no one suffered consequences. Then I pictured the group chat. The words, successful kids only. The public photo. The way my mother's first concern had been the mortgage, not my absence. And the reflex died. Not from cruelty. From maturity. I typed one message back. Just one. Call your successful kids. Then I blocked the number. I didn't attend a dramatic showdown. I didn't watch them lose the house with satisfaction. I didn't stand at the edge of their downfall and gloat. Because that would have meant I was still emotionally living in their world. And I wasn't. The truth is, I don't know exactly what happened after that. Maybe Mark and Emma stepped in. Maybe they didn't. Maybe my mother learned, finally, what it feels like when support disappears. Maybe she blamed me forever. But here's what I do know. For the first time in my life, my future was not being negotiated by people who didn't respect me. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their apology. I needed my own permission to leave. And I gave it to myself. I stopped asking my mother to see me. Because the moment I stopped begging for visibility, I became visible to myself. And that is the only recognition that lasts. So if you're listening to my story and you recognize yourself in it, if you've been the quiet one, the useful one, the overlooked one, let me tell you something with absolute certainty. You are not selfish for stepping away. You are not cruel for refusing to be used. You are not weak for choosing peace over performance. Sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is disappear from the lives of people who only loved her when she was convenient and never return.